The company Bangood asked if they could send me a product for review and evaluation, and I said, sure, go ahead and send it to me. Not too much of a poll in this or a say in this, but they sent me the same product as they did temporarily offline, being the ATU-100 Antenna Tuner. I'm going to jump in and take a look at this here, and the first thing I want to do is just kind of give you an overall look and a description of the actual product. How do you explain an antenna tuner to somebody who's completely new? And I think the best way is to explain it like this. Sometimes you have a wire length on your antenna that's not the ideal wire length, and it causes your antenna to not be resonant. Your radio wants to see something like 50 ohms, and this device here is going to help the radio believe that you have a 50 ohm antenna, so there's an impedance match instead of a mismatch, an antenna matcher. And why might you need this? Well, like I mentioned, some people might not actually have that opportunity to have a full-length antenna in their attic or out at parks on the air, and this is just going to help them. Or maybe they can't get all the bands and they really want to work 12 meters and they have a 15-meter antenna or a 10-meter antenna. You know, this might be for you. So let's take a look here. This is the ATU-100, and what is it about the ATU-100 that's so fancy? Well, not much. It's actually a budget antenna tuner. ATU-100, it works from 160 meters up to 6 meters, and it will work for 100 watts. Now, I think we should probably mention, though, that this does require 5 watts to activate the tune functionality, and there's an internal battery as well. Other than that, on the back here, we have an antenna in and an RF in. So you put your transmitter on the RF in, and then you would put your antenna in to the antenna portions. Something I specifically want to mention about Bangood, though, is when you're browsing the site and you see this product, there's 3 different photos because there's 3 different models, and you got to make sure which model you're getting. So this one, for example, has a micro USB for charging. There are a couple models with USB-C, and you would be very disappointed if you got the micro USB, but you were looking for the C, or if you got the QRP tuner and you were looking for the high power tuner. So keep that in mind. But a couple more notes about all this. And Bangood is not a company who's selling the product. They're a marketplace, much like Amazon is. So the seller didn't have much of a description for this ATU-100. He also wrote that this will accept a tune of 1 watt to 100 watts. And theoretically it could if you do some modifications, but we'll test all that in a second. But another thing here is he didn't really mention anything about the battery size internally, so we're going to figure all that out. And, you know, even something as simple as the mismatch values aren't really listed on the description, which becomes a problem. Now, if you don't know about mismatch values because you're new to radio or this is your first tuner matcher, let me kind of explain a few things here real quick. So let's say you have a mismatch of something like 150 ohms, okay? Meaning your antenna is showing 150 ohms. I mean, this is the most basic part of things possible here. Well, we want to get that to 50 ohms, and so that's 3 to 1. Okay, so most of these tuners that you see on Yaesus, on Icons, and all these good stuff, 3 to 1. Okay, maybe the Icon will do an emergency 10 to 1, meaning it will go 500 ohms and bring it down to something that the radio would like to see in the 50 ohm range. But we don't know what this antenna tuner or matcher that we have is actually capable of. It just doesn't show that information on the website. And you could argue, hey, why don't you just check out N7DCC, who designed this whole thing, and get the idea of what the match is. And I think the problem with that is when you start seeing these things mass produced in other places, sometimes to save money, the specifications aren't necessary. So I think the best thing for us to do is let's open this up, take a look inside, and maybe get some of that information we want. Hey, sorry about that hot audio in the beginning of the episode. I didn't realize how I was peaking on my new microphone, new mixer. So I'll work on all that. We'll get that taken care of. But talking about actually getting this open here, my initial impressions are it's pretty interesting. Now, Temporarily Offline had mentioned a few things about the glue and everything, but the first thing I noticed was this is kind of a crooked board in here. It might not be a big deal. The toroids actually seem pretty well wrapped, if you ask me. And I'm ignoring the obvious wires right here. Now these pins go to the OLED display, and they soldered them on poorly, by the way. Let's see here. Poorly. When they could have just used some more connectors like this over here, they decided to solder it on, which is weird. Furthermore, that master, I believe it's the master reset, the MCLR, is pretty bent. That's not a huge deal, but it is kind of odd. Oh boy, this isn't usable. I'm going to let you know right now that, hey, again, Bangood really isn't responsible for this. They're not the ones who sold the product. They just asked me to do a review, and I want to show you the next thing here that's really bad. Let's, yeah, you could see those solder joints on the SO239. Look at, there's just a ball of solder on there. The solder doesn't even go into, it doesn't even go into the SO239 connector, and it's not much better on the other side either. Otherwise though, so far, I guess it looks okay. There's some solder that melted onto some of the wires here. Yeah, you could probably tell it's right above the microchip, right where my finger is right there. And other than that, you know, I say okay. I mean kind of usable. And actually, you could see where my finger is right now. You could probably see that solder ball that is kind of just hanging out there too. So there's a lot of poorly soldered stuff on here. You know, not to beat a dead horse or anything. At this point, I was able to see the battery, and all the writing on the battery was in Mandarin, which I don't understand, so I did skip disassembling this further, but let's continue on because it gets really interesting. When it's over, I will lose count and 45. I will be thinking it over. Okay, so one of the problems that I had is when I tried to fix the solder on here, especially because the ground was kind of just hanging off, I had to unplug these, and I didn't write down, you know, what the order was. Fortunately, this is a very common OLED online, and I should be able to just define the schematics online and put them in the right spot. I mean, those wires still aren't good, I'll be honest with you. Like, I tried, here, let me turn it back on. I tried to do my magic here. Really don't like that. I'd probably replace that. No, actually the red wire, the ground that I tried to fix had come off again already, so back to the drawing board. All right, it's, you know, I got it to be better than what it was, which honestly, I'm not the best solderer in the world or electrical guy in the world, but it's better than it was, and I feel comfortable now plugging it in to test this out to see if it actually works. Well, I was gonna test stuff, and I went to take some coax out here, and yeah, the center portion of that SL239 pin, it just popped back in, but keep in mind another kind of not so right thing here. We'll see. Okay, well, you know, I'm not going to show you much of the testing because it happened again. And it's the RF import. Now, what I will tell you is when I get it down in there and it's making some kind of contact, it appears that it will function fine, meaning it'll tune up. For example, 30 meters is kind of one of those frequencies that I don't actually have a dipole length for. So I am tuning up on 30 meters and it tunes it fine or matches it fine. 80 meters is okay. It brings it down from 12.1 down to like 2.2 to 1, which I guess is considered usable. Like it's doing a job. And that's not the problem I have with. So to clarify, N7DDC, I think I got it right that time, he designed a fine product, meaning he has designed something that'll work. You could upgrade the firmware, you could change like EEPROM stuff, and you could do all kind of tinkering with it. It's really cool what he did. Bangood, they delivered a product, or they provided a medium to deliver a product. And even then, maybe even the buyer was unaware. You know, I could think of scenarios where I've purchased items in the past to resell, and then when people have gotten them, they've been like, hey, this has a Celeron processor, not an actual Pentium. And I'm like, oh man, I'm sorry, you know, and I'll do what I can to make it better. My point is, though, is the whole experience was kind of not good. If I was a paying buyer, I might be very upset. That's if I would be super upset if I damaged my radio. But that's if I was knowledgeable enough to make sure I looked inside and saw how poor the job was. Now, there's a lot of people out there right now who just get these, start using them and think, they're great. And maybe they're great for you now, but there's going to come a time in the future where it really messes something up. There was a point in there on the screen where I would be showing like a 1.1 to 0. Sorry about that, 1.1 to 1. I know better. It's just sometimes I make mistakes. And it looked great. I maybe had 100 watts, for example, through it. And then all of a sudden it would show 0 watts, 0 SWR, although I was still keyed up in my radio, and my radio standing wave ratio skyrocketed. Now think about that for a minute. You know, what's going on there? Well, you're about to fry out your radio because you have a poorly made piece of electronic equipment. You know, and as I look at it and I think about it, when you push this piece in and you have coax on here tight, really that internal piece should be secure enough to not create any kind of conflict with the standing wave ratio. So that might tell me that internally the SO239, this part right here, is maybe popping backwards a little bit, and it doesn't necessarily look like it, but also maybe we're losing ground somewhere too, because there's only these two little ground straps here, which are again creating the ground, and they're glued in. But you know, and I say it could be ground also because if you hit an internal port of the SO239 here and you hit the ground on an antenna tuner, they're going to have continuity. So regardless, somewhere there's an intermittent continuity issue as well that probably wouldn't be good for my radio. So I'm just throwing that out there. I'm going to leave you at that. Like this video if you like it. Let me know what you think below. Dislike it if you dislike it, but let me know why. I'm Ham Radio Dude 73.